With the Cabinet Secretary in charge of trade and investments in the country, Lee Kinyanjui. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking out for your feedback, some of which I can already see coming in. Feedback and questions. The hashtag is The Explainer at Citizen TV Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara. I'm tracking that, and we'll be putting your questions to the Cabinet Secretary. You started to talk about the Trump tariffs and how we are competitively placed, perhaps being amongst the lowest tariff band. CS, that's a good headline, right? Low tariffs. But are we competitive enough to take advantage of this against the others who have higher tariffs?
I think this is not the norm. We have not been here before. So nobody would claim to know how exactly it would look like. But the reason why so many countries have put up a very serious fight, lobbying, is because a difference of 5% can completely wipe your market. Because assuming your cost of production is the same, but you're arriving at 5% more expensive than my goods, then I'll have a price advantage over you when it comes to accessing the market. So there's no two way about it. Price means a lot. But I think more importantly is that Kenya has other huge advantages. And I want to take this opportunity also to say that in the last maybe 1 year or two, the number of companies from outside Kenya, from other parts of the world that want to come and set a base here, and I'm saying international because the international companies have an opportunity to look at the whole of Africa, the whole of Asia, and finally settle here. There are very many companies. We have young, educated people with the right work ethic. Cost of labor, if you compare, say, to Asia or even to Europe, is almost a third when you compare with Europe. So all those, when you build up, you get to a certain number. And also we have very good trade agreements across the world. So if Kenya has an agreement with UAE and you're producing from here, it means you have that market. We have an agreement with the European Union, then you have access to that market. Then labor is cheap. The only area where we need to do something is in the area of cost of power. But I think there's no country where you tick all the boxes. So sometimes you tick 5 and there's one that is a work in progress. And I'm happy to note that although our power is not the cheapest, it is the greenest, when it comes to renewable energy. And that has become a very big issue in production today. So there are companies that don't just want to produce, but they want to produce using green energy. So our energy mix is at 93% green energy. So for companies that have made commitments in the area of energy, then Kenya becomes very attractive. And we are currently in discussions with companies that want to set data centers for their global network right here in Kenya. So yes, we are competitive, but it's still work in progress. There's a lot we need to do. But I think one of the biggest capital that we've never quite appreciated is our education, our people, and their work ethic, because that really has made a huge difference. We currently have business process outsourcing, companies that have set up their back office here, and they're based in the US, they're based in Europe and any other place, but you have internet up to the village here in Nyeri, you have internet, Kisumu, Kericho, and all those places. So you can be able to set a company here responding to a demand in another continent far and wide. So the initial investments that have been made in internet connectivity, and this is an ongoing action, we are still going to different parts of the country, has made Kenya very competitive. I want to assure you, I met some investors who said that they went to one of the capitals within the continent, and when they left the hotel, there was no internet until they came back in the evening. But here you can go to the beach, you can go to the safari, you can go anywhere, and you're almost assured of network. That is not something we can take for granted. So there are opportunities. We are competitive, but I think as government, it's our responsibility now to make it even better and to look at our competition beyond our immediate neighborhood.
Yeah, and whilst that may be the case, I know you've talked about the cost of power. Surely it can be more competitive. And not just the cost of power, but the consistent supply of the same. But another area that perhaps we could talk about is standards. Everything else you mentioned is important as well. What's being done to help Kenyan producers meet the US standards, their quality and compliance benchmarks, so that then we can take advantage of that price point that you were speaking of?
In the past, when agreements were signed, there was very little effort to take those trade agreements to the people who do the actual production. So if I may give the example of the European Union agreement, it has a component that allows us to go to the counties and educate the people. These are the products that you can be able to access. These are the standards. These are the seasons, so that as you grow or produce, you can know which is the peak season, what is the sort of standard that you need to meet, and also connecting them with the market. So I think one missing link that has been there for a long time is we sign the big trade agreements, but we don't connect with that farmer, with that manufacturer, with that producer. So the conversations we've been having, I was in Nyeri, Nanyuki, and some of these other places we plan to go, I was in Embu the other time, is just to try and give a connection between the big agreements and that farmer who has 3 acres, who has 5 acres. What does this agreement mean to me? What does it mean to somebody who is in the livestock value chain? What standards must be would they require to meet in terms of being able to access the different markets, the different seasons, and so on? So that information is very important, and I want to say that even for the counties, we would want to partner with them so that this information is available to everybody. If somebody, you see now, in the past, I think as Kenyans, we normally go for one business and everybody does, like copies the other, and that's not very sustainable. But moving forward, we see Kenya being a leading exporter in the region. If you recall, in April, the president visited China, and I think one of the conversations we had there was, how can Kenyan goods enter the Chinese market at 0 tariff? Currently, we are considered a middle-level country, therefore we are not like Tanzania, Uganda, and our neighborhood. So that has largely been agreed, and now we are at the paper part, which means now we can be able to access that market at 0. So again, another huge market, a 1.4 billion market. So I think the biggest conversation, and this is really the challenge to our leaders, is how do we align our youths, the many young people who don't have a job, to now these huge opportunities that have come. Even for our banks, I've had discussions with all the major banks, and now saying we need to take this issue of export as a serious opportunity for Kenya. And luckily, Kenya, we have good weather round the year. So there are parts of the world where they cannot grow vegetables for like 6 months. That is now where a county like Kisii or Nyeri and another place can plug in, and we work together with those farmers and create employment. So I think the biggest part, and I really want to say that even the media has a role, is to break down those big agreements that we see with the leaders, with the presidents and the ministers, to a level where a small farmers group can understand in Kitui, they can see that they can grow chili, they can sell it into this market, and we facilitate that entire value chain.
All right. The exporters that you speak of, in fact, themselves complain about a number of issues locally. They complain about red tape, the high energy costs, which you have acknowledged here tonight, logistical challenges, an unpredictable tax regime where they're unable to plan for the medium and the long term. But yet it would seem we're focused on standards abroad and trade agreements when those exporters are raising some very serious issues that hamper them and in their challenge and their bid to export. So even whilst we might be competitive, but they're facing quite a few issues locally, CS.
Absolutely. I think I did say there's what we also need to do. I've said there's an information gap. I think that's the first point. The other one is the existence of red tape. Maybe you're bringing your produce from Kericho, you have to pass through 4 counties. You pay cess in every county that you go through. Those are issues we are dealing with, both in law, like now we are coming up with a uniform licensing bill, so that once you pay license in one county, as you bring, nobody else should ask you for any money, or if you're going to Mombasa. So we are already working on most of those issues. When it comes to fast process of documentation and all that, I'm sure you're aware of government online services. Now, we want to reduce the human interface because this is really where things get complicated. If you want to register your company, in another 24 hours, you'll have your company registered and you'll have your certificate and you can be able to progress. So government idea of making services online and removing the human interface is part of now trying to reduce the red tape that we have had. But having said that, I think we have an open door policy. We are in discussions with all these players so that even if we solve that issue, another one will emerge. And I think the point is we want to solve them as we move forward. But is there a day when all the problems will be solved? I'm not too sure that day will be there. So I think what we need to do is to run with what we have as we solve these issues together. And we have an implementation committee that also includes some of the people who are exporters. With KEPSA, with Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the Kenya Flour Council, we have regular consultations. One of the issues they raised was, for example, for every export consignment, they are paying something, and it was becoming too much. So again, we are already dealing with that. So I would say we have a very responsive sort of environment now, and I think with it, we'll be able to solve a lot of the issues that are currently there.
I want to talk a little bit about AfCFTA that's been billed as a game changer, those that have signed on to it. Even after all these years, intra-Africa trade remains low. Why do you think that is? What is Kenya doing? Maybe you could give us some concrete steps that Kenya is doing to break down barriers, tariffs, logistics, bottlenecks, and some of the inefficiencies that we see at border points.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is to note that, Africa was largely a colony of one superpower or the other. So, and the architecture of the colonial administration was to make African countries subservient to their colonial master. So if we produce tea here, we send it to the UK. If it's a French colony, so it was not aligned to trade with each other, like Uganda to sell to Tanzania and so on. No, you were to supply to the big factories in those countries. Now, if you look at the situation so many years later with Ghana and cocoa, we don't know Ghana for any chocolate, in spite of the fact that they're the biggest producers of that. So we have a big problem in terms of value addition, so we still send our produce raw up there. And I think it's out of that realization we've looked at, where are we in intra-Africa trade? I'm sorry to say it is the lowest in the whole world. It's at 16%. Compared, for example, to Europe, that will be doing about 60 or 70. So which is, if you look at Asia, I think they're about 60. So we're talking of very good numbers out there. So if when Kenya requires sugar and Uganda has it, we go to Brazil, for example.
I mean, it is easier to trade with the West than it is with our
left
neighbors.
with the excess sugar, then their farmers will be demotivated, they will not grow, so we can't move forward. Then here we have our excess milk. Instead of maybe Ethiopia buying from us, we have nowhere to sell. So you find farmers again pouring their milk. In the meantime, Ethiopia, say, buys their milk from Netherlands, for example. So I think there is a need, and a very urgent need, for intra-Africa conversation around trade. But what is the hindrance? If you want to take your commodity from here to, say, Mombasa, you have a container and you want to sell, say, to Nigeria, it first will go to maybe Singapore or Dubai, and then it will find its way. That will take like 30 days. So we don't have direct lines. If you want to drive from here to Kinshasa, you can't. But across the whole Europe, there's interconnectivity, both road, rail, and air. If you want to fly from here, say, to Algiers or to many of these other, you first fly out of the continent, then you come back. So there are logistical challenges, but you don't want to be prisoners of the obstacles. We have committed, and I think Kenya is taking a very strong position on this, to open our borders. If we want to buy any commodity that is available in our African countries, we should be able to consider that as our first priority. And likewise, if we also have our coffee and our tea, the question is, why should we sell our tea, say, to some place out of the continent, and then it is sold back? And that's the story with our flowers and all the other products that we have. So I think the point we must agree is that the part of the world, say like Europe, where they're at 70, if you look at their poverty levels, they are probably some of the lowest. So there's a direct connection between how well you trade with yourself and your poverty levels.
Yeah, and what about the PAP system? Can you give an update of whether Kenya, how much of that has been done, payments that have been done on the continent through PAPs? So
again, the other challenge that we had, once you say, fine, I'm going to buy cocoa, say, from Ghana, the next question is, how will I pay you? There are currency challenges across the continent, so you have to pay in US dollar, and so sometimes that currency is not always available in most of these countries. So again, what have we done? We have come up with a system where countries can pay in their local currencies. So Kenya can buy a product from Morocco using Kenya shillings. So we don't require the US dollar.
Yeah, well,
and it's working.
Yeah, that system has been launched. Do you have any data on how much
we launched
the payments have
Yeah, we launched it about 4 months. I may not have the exact data of where we are today, but I think the point we want to say is that for us to trade, we must have a payment system.
Yeah.
And you know, again...
Which we do already.
Which we do. PAPS is working well, but also banks that are continent-wide. So that if it's Equity Bank or KCB, for example, and we are very happy with our banks, by the way. If you go to Southern Sudan, Rwanda, Tanzania, all these places, you find our banks there. So part of encouraging trade is also having financial institutions, because there can be no trade without money transfer, without these banks also participating in that. So are we doing something? I think the answer is yes. Maybe the speed is what we need to put.
All right. We have quite a few questions that are coming in for you. Let's take a look at them now. We're trying to get through as many as we can. CS. So this is from Samiro Sim. How does the ministry plan to support small and medium business enterprises in Kenya? And what are some of the resources available in order to help them navigate international trade? Perhaps I would add, even just for a start, regional trade before we get to international. Let's answer that one, then we can get to the next one.
Thank you. I think every nation must appreciate the big corporates start as SMEs, for example. So if you don't have a clear trajectory of growing them to become the multinationals of tomorrow, they will not live to see that day. So one of the biggest successes we've had, we have actually a department within government specifically responsible for MSMEs. And we also have an incubation center called KIE, where we incubate. So sometimes you find like you want to package tea, but you can't buy the machine. So you need a place where you can hire the store. So there's that program already going on. But at my level, what are we doing? I think the first one is training. And as I've said, we are currently going across counties. I'll be in Nakuru, is my hometown. I haven't been there to talk to the business people who are there. But the idea is to show them opportunities that are there, how they can benefit, and how we can also connect them with the buyers across the entire globe. We are also working on financing. We appreciate that for a lot of the people in this space, maybe going to just a commercial bank and getting a loan is not very easy, because understanding international trade also takes a bit of time. Lastly is in the area of information. And I think this is the area that we are most deficient. There are commodities that can grow very well, say, maybe in Kajiado or Samburu and all those other places, but we are not growing them. And I want to give a good example. I met a farmer who's currently growing chili and exporting to the Asian market. And it is such that he cannot be able to meet his demand. And we have to really expand and encourage. And you know, chili grows in not even in the submarginal sort of areas where there isn't too much. But do the farmers know that? Do they know how much they can fetch per kg? So that information gap.
Why don't they? CS.
Like I said, we put a lot of emphasis on the big agreements. But the last mile to any agreement is a connection with the farmer, with the business person.
Okay, so
that's why we have said that we have county tours, correct, to now connect with those people, with the business associations.
Have those started?
Yeah, they've started. Okay. They've started. And we would really want even to encourage the media. We'll also be, because really this is where there's a gap, so that people have learned, people have the skill, you know, but we are not connecting with the market. So that linkage is what we want to solve. And I also want to bring some, I was in Kericho also on the same. We want to bring some of our young people who have succeeded in this area so that they can mentor others and show them the way.
Okay, let's take another one here. This one is from Caleb Ikenya. What is the future of the African Continental Free Trade Area status of implementation between Kenya and other party states based on the strategic positioning of Kenya as a key trade hub in the region?
I would say the future looks bright, and I think beyond just looking bright is that we all have a responsibility to make it work. And as I've said, just a month ago, we had a trade fair for all, African countries in Algiers. We took some of our Kenyan people there, and what we see is that the interest now is generating to a level where we can start seeing orders of coffee, of tea, milk, and all these other commodities that we have. The other issue we need to do is to also appreciate that there are language challenges. So you'll go to countries that are predominantly French. So again, we need to help our market to understand that if you're producing for a particular market that is French or Portuguese, for example, we align that. And I think that's now where our TVETs and our institutions of higher learning come, that we need need to also have young people who can do the marketing in those languages. So there are language barriers, the infrastructural barriers, there's political barrier, which is now what we're dealing with at our own level. But I want to say that the future, if you want to remain at 16% intra-Africa trade, then the future will be very bleak. And we'll continue seeing our young people in boats in the Mediterranean capsizing and being called immigrants all over the world, while we can provide solutions back here at home.
Here's a question from Wamboi Mbarire. She's from RETRAC, that's the Retail Traders Association. She says, ask him about the asks for extension. I think this is with respect to AGOA. Considering Trump's, that's US President Trump's transactional nature, have we considered the concessions we might have to make that may cost us more jobs than the 60,000? So are there any concessions? Maybe you can talk to us first about the nature of the talks. Have there been more concessions that have been
I think
made? More demands from the
industry? Kenya and the US are strategic partners. They don't relate only in trade. They have other security and strategic partnerships across the region, including what you are doing in Haiti. So when you're dealing with a country where your interests are not just on trade, then some of the concessions may be in some of those peacekeeping things and all that, which we are already participating. But I want to say that Kenya is a very respected member of the international community. Maybe here we may not appreciate that part. So in dealing with the US, they have interests and they know they can also achieve them through Kenya.
So have there been any concessions that have been made? Any more demands that have been made on African countries with respect to the extension of AGOA?
No, not to my knowledge. But also, all I would say is that we have the best teams on the negotiating table. And even if there was any, Kenya's national interest would always prevail. That's really, because, we cannot predict what may come tomorrow. What is important. Especially
with the administration that you are dealing with in the United States, known to be unpredictable, known to be transactional in nature. If there are concessions that, for you, what would some of those be, in your view, that would be a deal breaker, that would draw the line?
You're inviting me to play some, predicting what they are likely to ask. But I think first, Kenya has signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Whenever you're getting to an international negotiation, the first thing you sign is that. So it would not be appropriate to say this is what they're asking, this is what they're doing, but the final agreement is what is made public. But I want to confirm that from the Kenyan point, maybe even things we never looked at before are now currently on the table. And as I have said, I would not want to associate myself with something that won't work. So I can give you the confidence that we are doing the best and we have the best teams to make sure that this process is concluded.
Okay. Yeah. Let's and conclude it to the benefit of Africa and Africa's trade. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's take another question here. This is from Bukusu or Omwami. Ask him about KIPES. They were to be completed by end of, and these are the county industrial parks. They were to be completed by the end of 2025, but to date most have stalled. Kenya copied from Ethiopia and mushroomed in each county without economies of scale. How will neighboring counties do value addition for similar products?
Thank you. So I think there was a huge ambition around the KIPES to have them in the 47 counties. But what we have now are 14 that have made good and significant progress. I've had the opportunity to visit Busia, and I would say they are probably at around 80%. I went to Bungoma. I would give it maybe at 40, 50%. I went to Embu, and they have done a sterling job, maybe at 90%. I went to Meru, maybe 95%. I went to Kirinyaga. They're also doing very well. So different counties at different levels. But I think what is significant is, what is this whole KIPE thing all about? You see, if you want to come and buy, say, macadamia, and you know Kirinyaga is a macadamia growing area. You won't go to every farm. So we wanted a place where they can aggregate all the macadamia, they can do a bit of value addition. So if a buyer wants to come and buy the macadamia, they'll come and buy there and sell it. So cooperatives have taken up, individuals who want to do value addition are there, and I want to say that this is really the future of Kenya. This is cottage industry. In the past, you required to go and buy your land, do change of user, bring power, bring water. All that has been done for you. So you just come to plug and play. In fact, in places like Meru, they have even gone to the extent of having cold rooms. So if you are a person who probably is in the meat business or any other of the perishables, you don't need to have a cold store. You just go and lease it for the day or for 2 days. You pay whatever you need to pay, and then tomorrow you can take your produce. So we reduce the post-harvest losses that we've had for all this time. So I see a lot of future, and even for the counties that are not maybe where these are, I see a huge future in the days to come.
Let's take another question, and then we can start to hear from Captain Amani Sankale. Industrialization is the only way to boost our economy. I am a mini manufacturer in sound systems, but the taxes being charged to machinery we import is too high. Can Waziri help us on this issue?
Yeah. So any equipment we import for purposes of manufacturing is and should be duty-free. So I think maybe this is part of the information that most of our people do not understand, VAT and all those issues. So I think especially for young people who want to get into this space, we would want to support them, including the person who's getting into sound. And as I said, the young people and the knowledge skills that we have built over the last few years simply means that this country is now at the takeoff stage from a knowledge point of view. So what is lacking is just that knowledge, capital, and connection to the market. Once we do that, Kenya will stand in its right place. And yes, we would want to support them. And we have specific institutions, like I said, KDC for financing. We have KIRDI for purposes of training people on industrial research. We also have KEBS to help you ensure that whatever you produce is to standards, and many others that we could mention.
Let's take one final question here from Samuel Orutwa. Ask the CS to have a look within the studio to see if there's anybody wearing Made in Kenya merch. Why should we chase unknown markets overseas, and yet we have local markets here ready to capitalize before targeting foreign markets?
I think that's...
Are you wearing Made in Kenya?
Okay, first I want to make...
Before we turn the spotlight on ourselves here.
Yeah, I am wearing Made in Kenya.
Okay.
And I also want to confirm that some of even what you wear...
The suit is made in Kenya?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the point I wanted to say first, even what you're buying as new may well have been made in the river, exported to faraway countries, and finally brought here. So I think what we need to do...
But that's the Mutumba that you say we should...
No, even new clothes, that same quality that you're now buying a second-hand and thinking it's superior may have been made in Athi River or Nakuru. Okay. So what you're trying to say is that there is nothing that cannot be done here. In fact, I would want to invite anybody to some of our places where we are doing the textile. It's wonderful. So we need just to change our mindsets to know that we have the top brains in design. We have the best clothes that some people fly to those big countries, buy it at 10 times the price, and finally ship it back here.
Yeah, I want to ask this because, I mean, for people who are enthusiasts of fashion, some of us are, you know, you go online and there's these stores that are making, you know, clothing in the country, but they're unable to do this at scale. Yeah. So that the clothing is affordable to, you know, many Kenyans. Because currently many of them will charge a higher amount. And you know why. If they're only making few items, then of course the cost is going to be higher. So what would you do to incentivize them so that all of these young people, designers, and who are buying fabric made in the country, who are, you know, sourcing the materials locally, are able to do it at a good price point, to have labor that is cost-effective, the cost of energy to produce that is also cost-effective, so that it's affordable to a majority. Yeah. Because if we're being honest, you know, the reason people go for second-hand clothing is the cost.
Yeah. So I think the first point is that the power of the internet, the power of digital trade. So today, you can order anything from any part of the world. So the fact that you have a small shop, it may not even be a shop. It could be even on your backside, you know, your office, your house, you know, the garden, you convert it into whatever it is, and you're able to sell to all over the world. So I think really what we are trying to encourage in Kenya, and I think this is also an opportunity that we all need to take advantage of, the miracle of M-Pesa, being able to send money anywhere from any place. Then why can't I, if I'm in Nakuru, Naivasha, wherever I am, I have my own platform, I display my everything, and I can send. So I think there's been a bit of a gap. If you look at how our young people are creative, how they've been able to, in fact, if you look at digital penetration in the whole continent, we are doing very well, but not from a marketing point of view. So if you're able to convert...
marketing, you think marketing is the issue? Because those young people who are online,
our young
using
people,
the various social media, are still struggling with everything you've said, right? Good internet, good penetration, good devices, they're creative, but
mental orientation.
Still struggle. Mental orientation of who?
Yeah. Today, Kenyans
consumers?
can make a matter trend in the whole world. So why can't they make this fashion guy who's doing some clothes from Limuru, who's doing this whatever product, trend in the whole world?
So you think it's Kenyans who need to do the work? Can we, Waziri, make predictable tax regimes trend? Can that be something that is a trending topic? Because it would seem that you are shifting responsibility to consumers to say, do this and make this more marketable, when the things they're complaining about is the high cost of energy, is about a high tax regime, an unpredictable one. We're one of the few countries that has a finance bill every year. So that means if you were planning with this year's, next year, you have to wait and see. Those are the issues, not necessarily the internet, not their creativity, not their availability. These are the issues that they're complaining about. And those have been complaints, Waziri, in this country for decades. So what is this administration, what is your tenure going to do that makes this different?
So I think first, on the issue of marketing, I would say Kenya is a good market, but the world is bigger than Kenya. So if you want to produce this pen for the world, you must have what does the world want, what are the standards, what is everything. So, because you have an unlimited population across the whole world. So I think we may confine ourselves maybe to the finance bill and everything, but I'm trying to say if you look at the global trends today, the world is becoming more and more open. The traditional market of you going with your wares to sell is becoming less and less. And if we are now in the age of AI, if we don't align ourselves to that market that we are going to, if we don't look at the skills that will take our young people to the next level, we'll have a problem. Now, with the issue of predictable taxes, I think I've said it, and I don't know how many more times we must say this. If we had a 5-year tax index where everybody knows this is what I want, it will be the best thing that would happen to this country.
Why can't we?
That's the constitution that you and I passed. You know, this is now the other thing we need to know, that on one side, when the constitution gives certain provisions we like, we want to go by it. There are also certain provisions that are not economically very viable.
The constitution and the finance bill?
Yeah, anticipates a finance bill every year through Parliament. Parliament has the final say. It's not even the executive. It is Parliament that has the final say. But I think the point you're trying to say is not to blame this institution or the other. I think as a country, if I'm coming to put my 3 billion in an industry, I would want to be sure that for the next 5 or 6 years, this is a tax regime that I expect. So on that one, I think we have some work to do. We're in discussions also with Parliament, including the business community, to try and create a platform of a bit of predictability. But I also want to say this. If you look at the countries that are the biggest exporters or manufacturers, whatever you want to look at, and you look at some of the things that are not favorable, and I want to use an unlikely example. In the continent, maybe the country with the highest tourism could be like Egypt. But if you go to Egypt in some parts of the year, the temperatures are at 40 or 45. So yet we have fewer visitors than them who have crazy weather. Or even if you look at Dubai, why would people be going to holiday in a place at 45 degrees while here we have 30? So it does not mean that when all the conditions are right, everything will work for you. We have to work with what we have. What you can't change in the short run.
What, in your view, are some of those issues that are right? Like you say, maybe all conditions cannot be perfect.
Yes.
You're marketing Kenya as the East African investment hub.
Africa.
Okay.
Yeah.
But investors are increasingly looking at Kigali, Dar es Salaam, even Addis. What would you say to that? I mean, just take a look at how Rwanda is marketing itself. Over the weekend, they had an international cycling competition. Just yesterday, they announced that Visit Rwanda will be, in LA, in 2 teams at least. But investors are, if we're being honest, CS, looking at all of these others. So perfect circumstances or not, there is interest in other countries, even in the East African region.
Yeah. So, I draw my salary from the government of Kenya. So my pitch is for Kenya. But I want to be very categorical. If you look at the volume of business into Kenya versus all those countries you have said, and I think this is something that Kenyans have not quite been able to appreciate. All the countries in the region, the country they look up to, the place they go to invest, where they take their children, the rich bring all their children here. They invest here. When you see all the investments in Nairobi, this is not at 100, about 50% of what you're seeing is actually by people within the region. So what are the attractions? I think the first one is a stable shilling. We are now at 129 shillings to the dollar. There are countries that have fluctuated. Some have devalued their currencies by over 50%. It is not fair to mention them. But if you're investing, the stability of a currency becomes the first and most important thing. The second thing is a stable macroeconomic environment. Kenya has offered that. Third is law and order. So here, if we don't agree with you, you are my tenant, you are my landlord, you are my employer, we'll go to court. And courts in Kenya are known to overturn even the biggest employers, even government, even overturn an election. That creates stability. Let me tell you, that does not happen in any other African country. So that has created, everybody knows if you don't agree, I have somewhere to go. Look at the educated population. If you think of hospitality, whether you're in Dubai or within the larger East Africa, it's Kenyans who are running all these 5-star hotels because we have confidence in the education system that we've created. I've already talked about the internet. I've talked about democracy. We know we may not always like the outcomes, but there'll be an election, and Kenya will move forward from that. That's not a statement you can ascribe to every other African country. So I think there are many issues. We also have a very huge international goodwill. And I think Kenya's participation in many issues, whether they are peacekeeping missions, we've now gone to Haiti, Kenyans may not see that. But if you look at that in terms of creating a global goodwill, we are way ahead of almost any other country that you would imagine. If you look at the president's speech the other day at the UN and how Africa can be included in the Security Council, I think those are conversations that are not just for Kenya, they are for the whole continent. So when you see, and I would invite you to go to the areas of Kitengela that were previously all the way to Isinya. Those were areas that were previously for grazing. Now we have massive industries that have come. You need to go to Tattoo City. See industries that are 100-acre, beacon to beacon, all that's an. You go to Ruiru. You go to sections of Nakuru and many other places that, do you have challenges? Yes. But in spite of those challenges, we're moving forward. And I think that's a message you want to give. And not to say that the other countries are not doing well, but I know they know in their heart of hearts the country they would want to be when they grow up is Kenya.
Okay. So Kenya is hosting the COMESA Summit next week. So what is Kenya's agenda in championing and positioning itself? What's our agenda with hosting this Heads of State Summit next week?
Yeah, so we have the COMESA Summit from the 7th to 9th, and COMESA brings together African countries with the trade agreement. We want to trade, and we want to open our borders, look at the challenges that we have had, evaluate how each country is doing, and try and open up our borders so that the maize from Malawi can be sold in Kenya, and when we have excess product we can sell. Is that whole agenda. But I think more importantly is that Kenya will be assuming the chairmanship of the COMESA, and President William Ruto will now become the new chairman of the COMESA. Again, championing Africa trade, because AfCFTA is actually a culmination of SADC and all these other trading blocks put together. And I am sure through this, again, Kenya's voice within the trade circles is going to be up there. And what we want to do is, we don't want to be complaining. We want to be there in the table where decisions are made on trades and anything relating to industry and investment. And using such platforms, we'll be able to reach out to investors, we'll be able to reach out to industry, we'll be able to solve problems, to open up our borders, and to allow Kenyans to go and trade and do business. And I think that really becomes a very strong platform for Kenya.
All right, my final question to you. The seat you're sitting in has been occupied by two other predecessors in a span of 2.5 years. What would you say has been your tenure to improve the state of trade and economy? What do you want to be your legacy? The one thing that we will say after your tenure, that there was this one, maybe two, I mean 3, 4, 5 if you're fortunate,
okay,
to manage that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, for an important ministry such as that, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it because that's another matter, mm-hmm. but you can't understand, mm-hmm. there's been 3 CSs now, including yourself, in that position for the last 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. What will you say will be your legacy? What is the one thing that you have done that's outstanding, that has changed the fortunes for trade in the country?
Okay. I haven't been there long enough to say we have brought certain things to fruition. But I want to say this, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade are outward-looking ministries. We interact with other parts of the world. And I think the first thing is to create relations with those countries with a view to taking economic advantage. So issues to do with AGOA, issues to do with the trade agreement with this country and the other, increasing our volumes of trade. Also, auditing some of our trade agreements. We are currently trying to look at India. We have an unimaginable deficit with India. Much of the pharmaceutical products come from India, and we think it doesn't look too good. So we would want to see how can we be able to manufacture part of that here, or in return to what they're selling to us in pharmaceutical, they must take something from us. So questioning and auditing some of these things will create opportunities. And I think the best way to look at our ministry is also to look at the economy. If the economy is performing very poorly, then you can be sure the Ministry of Trade and Investment is not doing well. But if you look at the foreign direct investments coming here, if you look at industry, if you look at stability of the shilling, and I want to say that we want to change the matrix, that when Kenya or any other foreign African country goes to the Western world, we don't go with a ball. We go with, we want to sell this to you. And that's what brings dignity to a relationship. Instead of we're coming, there's famine here, we can't feed our children, there's all this. Now we want to change that conversation to saying, we can be able to supply this, give us the market. And that's creating dignity with Kenya and many other of the African countries that you're trying to have. But lastly also, the industrial agenda that the president has started from the CIPES to the special economic zones is on a growth trajectory. The interest you've seen in the last maybe 6 or 4 months is very encouraging. And I want to assure you that the contribution of industry to GDP, which has not been very good in the past, is going to change, especially once we address some of these issues that we have already said. But allow me also to say, if you want quick returns, industry is not the place where you have quick returns. In fact, if you see all the people who have gotten into industry, they are people who believe in the long term. You shoot for the long term if you want to think industry. It's not for deal makers. So as a country, if you want to develop our industry, we must look into 10 years, into 20 years, and moving forward. Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time here on the program with us. We are hoping and waiting. Time difference issues will perhaps be in Africa's favor when we take a look at the AGOA agreement. So we'll be waiting to see what's happening in the US. All right. So thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary Lee Kinyanjui, for making some time for us here today. Also, thank you for your contribution, you and your friends. All of you friends are all alumni of Kenyatta
I'll
University?
recruit all my good friends we studied together.
So all of you, okay.
Yeah.
So the Cabinet Secretary tonight and his fellow alumni pledging 500,000 shillings to the alumni fund, which will go towards Duncan Barongo and others who may need some help with furthering their education. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for your time. Also, as we take a break, let me just give you an update. I know many of you are asking for the contacts for Duncan Barongo, how you can reach him. We have a contact. We'll be sharing that in just a moment here on The Explainer. So please stay with us. We've got that and the day's business and sports news when we return.